I'm Nathan. I do not have a list of credentials for doing this talk. I just like to mess around with stuff. And somebody asked about talking on on ActivityPub. But so if you don't know what ActivityPub is, now this isn't even working. Well, maybe it wasn't the clicker, Josh. There we go. Social media. Love to hear. It's a big part of the internet. There's a lot of tech that goes into it. Right now, you see a lot of social media lives sort of its own bubble. This guy looks pretty sad. He's having to manage all these accounts. Dealing with to keep up with all his friends. He just wishes it was possible to have like one account. You could still interact with all your friends across all the different platforms without having to manage so many different stuff. And there is a solution, ActivityPub. It is a protocol that enables different social media sites to operate together, so you can be on one, interact with people on the other ones. If you've heard of it, it's probably because of Mastodon, which is a Twitter knockoff. I won't get sort of beyond, and I put it beyond Mastodon on here in case anybody is familiar with ActivityPub. I do want to talk about more than just Mastodon because I don't really feel like the Twitter clone is particularly interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever done like full stack frameworks, usually use them as their example site. So I want to get beyond that, talk about some other use cases. We have some on here. We could talk about them quickly later. And then I like to talk about sort of novel use cases for this that don't probably fit within the intended use case, but I think are pretty fun ideas. So I focused on ActivityPub for this talk. It is a W3 recommendation, so it sort of has a standard spec. It's well written, has a lot of people talking about it because it is part of the W3C. And unlike a lot of federated systems, it actually has people that use it. Up until recently, it was the only one that had anybody using it. So that's why the talk started on that one. So I want to go over quickly how it works. So the high-level overview from the W3C is ActivityPub. The ActivityPub protocol is a decentralized social networking protocol. It provides a client-to-server API for creating, updating, and deleting content, as well as a federated server-to-server API for delivering notifications and content. That's mostly a whole bunch of buzzwords. So, but there are two main parts. It provides the specification for client to server. So that's like the app you would use on your phone and how it interacts with the server. The positive I like, and part of why I like the spec is it makes it a lot easier to swap out the app on your phone or the web browser you use to interact with the server. If anybody remembers Reddit or Twitter cutting out their APIs and then becoming basically only the official app was supported, ActivityPub has an open API spec for clients. So pretty much any site that uses it has tons of different apps you can pick from. And then most importantly is the server-to-server aspect that actually handles sort of the federated and decentralized part of that, which enables the different sites to work together. So at a high level, though, you have users. They use their client, and there's the client-to-server API here. And then there's also server-to-server API. You see here, they use the terms inbox and outbox. It is modeled very closely to email. When you want to post something, if you like a comment, make a post or anything, you send it. You make a post request to your server's outbox, and then the server-to-server APIs handle federating that out, sending out that content to other servers that might be interested in using it. And then if somebody posts something out in the rest of the world on some other server that you're not part of, but that you are following somebody out there, it'll send requests to your inbox, and that kind of makes up basically your feed when you go into the app. So it is very similar and modeled after email. So I'll go through a quick example, because I feel like this is what helped me understand it the most. So we have Alyssa here. She's on this blue server here, and she decides she wants to send a post to her friend Ben. So she goes into her app, she types up a message, and then she sends this JSON here to her server. There are the main parts of the spec are these types. The W3 has a bunch of types defined for pretty much what you would need to do a pretty basic social media implementation. They call them activity streams, but the main type is the note, and that's basically like, they just came up with the best word that they could find that was not tweet or post to avoid confusion. And you see she wants to send it to her friend Ben, who is at chatty.example, a different server from the one that she's on, social.example. She has a post here. She's trying to get her book back that he borrowed. And these are taken, this example is taken from the specification. We want to dive into more details of it. But, so she sends it to her server. Her server does what you would expect a social media site to do. It saves it to a database somewhere, creates a URL so it can be looked up later. And then it gets ready to send it to Ben. Since he lives on a different server, it has to do the federation part and send it out. But you know, as it's called ActivityPub, so everything that gets published over the network has to be an activity. A note is not really an activity, so it takes it and wraps it up into a create activity. You can see it has like who's Alyssa is sending it, you know, it's going to Ben, and then her note would live inside of this object. So if there's anything that's being sent that's not an activity, it has to get wrapped up as create. So there's also like update and delete for stuff like notes. But Alyssa's server goes and it wraps up in this create activity, and then all it does is just sends it, it posts it to Ben's inbox, which lives at his username. Sends it over, and then his server will take it, save it to his inbox, so that when he comes online, he doesn't have to go, you know, and search out, you know, he doesn't have to go and search out Alyssa's server. His app can just go up, load his inbox, kind of like when you open up your email, and it'll show him, you know, Alyssa has a post here for you that you haven't seen, and it lives in here. And it kind of makes up his feed. So there are, you know, lots of stuff. There's also likes, you know, built in. They have a bunch of different stuff, but they have like likes. They work pretty similar to notes. You know, it's just a different type. This one, likes are actually an activity. You know, you can like something. So this one, whenever you like something, you'll send it out. Kind of depends on, so you know, it's a little bit hard to talk about at the abstract level because it kind of depends on the server implementation, on exactly how it decides to federate. You have a lot of control over where your content goes, depending on what server you choose or how you implement it. But you know, you might want to send likes to send it back to the server where the post originally came from, or some implementations will often send the likes to, if you like some, you know, so Sally here liked something, it might send out the activity not just to the person who posted the note that you liked, but also to all of Sally's followers, if that's the kind of server that you're on. Speaking of followers, you know, there's like other stuff like follow activities. So here, Sally followed John. You know, so Sally's server would have to send this follow activity over to John's server, and then John's server would be responsible for keeping track of all of his followers. And then when he does something like post a new note or like something, it sends out a request to all of his followers' inboxes to let them know, you know, John did something, so that they, when they go in and check their feed later, they can see what John was up to and all the other people they're following. So, whoops, I think I missed it. I had him on that slide. Oh, yeah. So that does mean, you know, so theoretically, you know, say John has, you know, 1,000 followers. That does mean that theoretically, you know, John's server would then be responsible for sending out, you know, 1,000 HTTP requests every time he posts something. There are some optimizations. There's like a shared inbox so that you can send, like, if John has 500 followers on, you know, server A, his server only has to send to like one request, and then that server can be responsible for sending out to the 500 people that it manages. You know, if you want to get into the details, you know, the specification is very thorough. You go read it there. But yes, so every server that receives a note keeps a copy of that note, and that is correct. Yes, it does. So how does that scale? These are usually the questions I get when talking about it. Anything scales if you have enough servers. That is definitely not official DevOps advice. But in this case, it is kind of true. kind of a tenet of ActivityPub is that servers can stay small. If you have a small server, if it's just you or just you and like 10 other people, you won't, even if each person follows a somewhat large number of people, you won't be receiving that much content. You don't have to receive, as long as all the servers are behaving appropriately and following the specification, your server shouldn't get overwhelmed with content. You should only receive the content that your users are interested in. So if the servers are small enough, you don't really run into any scaling problems. Certainly, I've run one with just myself on it, and it was easy to keep up. So this is a little bit true in this case, that if everybody's distributed across more servers. That does kind of increase the bandwidth traffic between all of them if they have to send to if they're sending to a whole bunch of servers. But that is more of the internet provider's problems, not really ActivityPub. So yeah, so I just want to, any questions? I figured it's a good spot to stop. It's a little bit hard to just talk about in the abstract, so I figured it would be a good spot to stop and have questions. If anybody has any questions, just to make sure that the basic concept of it is somewhat understood. Yes, Joel? Facebook doesn't do ActivityPub protocol, no. So like I said, Mastodon is the most well-known one. There are some there's like an Instagram knockoff, there's a Reddit knockoff, there's a YouTube knockoff. There's like a knockoff for a lot of the popular sites. Threads, I guess speaking of Threads, Facebook's, Twitter, is talking about and has implemented some ActivityPub standards. No, you could build something like Hootsuite easily for it because because like the API is standardized, it would be a little bit easier probably to build a Hootsuite, and you would only have to publish one place because then if everybody, people can follow your one main account. You don't have to have one across all the different platforms. Alex? No, you would only, it would be for the people you follow, assuming that the servers are behaving properly. Your server is only supposed to send, so like if you follow somebody on that server, that server is not supposed to send you all of the content that it knows about. It should just send you the stuff that the person you're following is doing. I mean, that is like the subscription. The following is the subscription action. Yeah. Yeah. That is 2 slides. I'll mention it. All right. We'll go to that one then. So yes, what can we do with this? Like I said, I want to talk about more than just Mastodon. That's the easy one. It's Twitter. It's just Twitter. It does implement, so Mastodon implements pretty closely to the official spec. And like I had earlier, there's the activity streams. So you see that context there is the official one that is sort of the bare minimum to implement. And if you can implement that, you can your site can interact with a lot of the other sites. Yeah, you can interact with a lot of the other sites. But I want to talk about, and the first one here I'll talk about covers sort of that, like you said. So there's a lot of knockoffs of all of the popular sites. There's PixelFed is Instagram, and PeerTube is YouTube. They all have horrible names because it's still too nerdy to have marketers working on all this stuff. One I like is Bookworm, which is Goodreads knockoff. But what I think is interesting about them is that they kind of did that. They have added their own types. They added reviews and quotations, which are both Goodreads features. And so if you're on a site that is using the Bookworm server code, you'll get like the full features. You'll see the whole review and the quotations and done up in there, whatever the style that whatever client you're using. They have the full support for the features. But then if you have a follower who's like on some other site that doesn't support that, it will convert them back down into activity stream compatible types. That way people on other servers, they might not get the full experience, but they'll at least be able to see, you know, oh, this person posted a review. I can go open up their page in Bookworm and read the whole thing. So it kind of so they've kind of added on to the standard while still maintaining interoperability with other sites in a really neat way, I think. They also have a pretty interesting way for distributing the book data across the network so that not every server has to have a copy of every single book that exists. I have not looked into that too much, but I think it is interesting what they're doing.
So if every you get, I follow somebody and they send me like, hey, they need to review and I have to go to the bookworm.social anyway. Isn't the whole point that it is better?
So like I said, yeah, but because Bookworm has added the types, you know, all the other servers aren't going to implement their specific types. If they were to post, like if you're on so PixelFed is like Instagram, so you'll see, but pictures are supported on like Mastodon. So you can see, it'll just look like it's like normal in there. So like if they're implementing the base, so what Bookworm uses, they use a longer type called an article. And articles, at least on Mastodon, are usually, they shorten it because they're supposed to be just short. They shorten it to a link to the original source. So that's sort of an implementation detail. Theoretically, Mastodon could post the entire thing. Like if they posted the entire article in your feed, then you would see Bookworm reviews as like the full thing. That's just sort of it depends on how the server and client that you're using implement the features. So the other one that I think is really interesting, getting away from social media really, is ForgeFed. It is not actually a platform. It's like a second layer over top of ActivityPub to create its own protocol. But it is for creating like GitHub-like websites. So this one, you can host your code somewhere, and then the goal is to be able to support like issues and PRs and contributions from users on other sites. So it's, like I said, it's still in development, and there's a couple of like prototypes of it. I am pretty interested to see where it goes. And GitLab is also have a plan in place to implement ActivityPub. I don't think they plan to do ForgeFed. They are planning to do ActivityPub, support similar stuff. And then if you wanted to try it out, GoToSocial is like a small personal tweet-like server that you can use. I like it because you can like sort of own your own data by running your own server. It's pretty easy to get started with this one. So if you just wanted to try it out. But I think we can do even more. I like the idea of using it. It is just activities, and there's plenty of stuff outside of social media that could be used for, that could be, you know, expressed as activities. You know, all the projects that are still ongoing with ActivityPub are social media based, which makes sense because it is, you know, intended for that purpose. But I like to try and break stuff. So I've been working on some small projects. Anybody's free to steal the ideas. But I think home monitoring via ActivityPub would be somewhat interesting. Giving like each of your little sensors its own like little feed, and then being able to subscribe to them. It kind of gives you like cheap redundancy without having to bother with RAID or actual redundancy, because as it spreads it out. Theoretically, I was also thinking you could have like one of the servers up in the cloud. That way your home server could post up to it, and then you could access it from anywhere without having to do any sort of like port forwarding. I think online gaming is a possibility with it. There was a defunct chess project, although it just hijacked Mastodon posts, so it wasn't really its own thing. This one has sort of an interesting problem in that you don't have central like trust through the system. So if you're playing a game where you have to like roll dice or something, there's no way currently in ActivityPub of trusting that the other person is telling you the truth. So I think there's an interesting problem there you could solve if you tried to implement a game, a more complicated game. And then federating blogs. If anybody misses RSS, the hot new way to syndicate stuff is through the Fediverse, through ActivityPub. But everybody I've seen does it. They create like an account on some big Mastodon server, and they post it on there, and then they scrape the comments off of it with a web scraper instead of doing it the real way of setting up a server. I think a project where you set up like an actual server and have the blog post out to the internet for you, and then collect the comments and likes on the server is still something I've not seen anybody actually try to implement. So I added this kind of last minute because I started this talk a little bit before Blue Sky really caught on. So the app protocol is what Blue Sky uses because Jack Dorsey has to be different. He's also moved on and started a new one, which I don't even know the name of that one. But I stuck with, I did not do the talk about the app protocol because it is, even though it is decentralized, because it is only decentralized in theory, and it's completely centralized if you look at Blue Sky. But there are some other ones. There's like Matrix, but that one's for messaging, not for general activity-based stuff. And then all the other protocols are either completely unused, they use like blockchain for some reason. It's just horribly difficult to get into and use yourself. I really like ActivityPub because it is very simple. It's just very basic post and get requests with the JSON data. It's pretty easy to implement. The concept is just the inbox outbox. So I like it. I think back when I built a ActivityPub server a few years ago, back when it was just after I think it became like a W3 recommendation. It took me like 3 hours to implement most of the spec. So it's very easy to get into and get started with. So I think it's a lot of fun to mess around with. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any kind of signing or cryptography that says, hey, I sent this message?
There is, if anybody knows WebFinger signing, it uses that. I do not understand how it works. I did implement it from the spec. I think I did it correctly, but I really do not know. And I certainly cannot comment on it for security purposes. But it does use WebFinger if you're familiar with that. Yeah. I did mention like if there's a server that has a lot, like if somebody has a lot of followers on run server, there is an optimization for a shared inbox so that a server, when it goes out to send like notes to a bunch of other servers, it's supposed to, there's a way for them to try and figure out which users are on the same server. And then if that server implements the shared inbox, it's supposed to send just one message. Theoretically, you can have, I mean, obviously none of the sites currently using ActivityPub are any bigger than any of the popular social media sites. But there is that bandwidth of making, network requests that does cause them to hit some scaling issues sooner than a larger site that does, all of its work internally. Yeah, it does. But I've not worked with that very much. But it does have that, yeah. So that's where if like a server is about to shut down, you are able to transfer your account to a different server if we want to, yeah.
You mentioned a couple times that if the server follows those rules.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you come into that or if this is something that's a general issue.
So I haven't run a big server, but from what I've seen, there are sometimes, I mean, you can have, obviously, you have endpoints that are open to accepting posts like and content. So bad actors can come in. and try to either DDoS, or they just decide that to spread the reach of their content, they try to post to every server that they possibly can, instead of just servers where people follow them. Because some servers like Mastodon will tend to show they have like options to see every post that the server knows about. So sometimes people try to game that by sending their posts to every single server, hoping it shows up on some kind of discovery page. Servers admins have kind of built a sharing, they have like a culture of like sharing ban lists basically for bad actor servers. But if you're following the actual specification, you'll just be sending stuff to servers. But obviously anybody can. I mean, like I said, it's a pretty simple specification. So there's people who implement it in ways to try and game the system. So, yes, Tim. Well, it's part of W3C. The specification itself is part of W3C, so there's like a working group that put it together. So yeah, so like it's mostly, I think it's mostly static at this point. I think there are still some groups working to add more stuff. Like right now, everything is considered public. They don't have like DM support, like private direct messages in the standard itself. So there are still some, but there's not. I don't think there's been a new revision to it lately. Yeah, I mean, theoretically it would be Mastodon, but there are several thousand Mastodon servers. A couple of those are like bigger than other ones. But I think there's enough. I think there's enough with it, like resistance to like a one server taking over. That's why, obviously, that's why they're on using ActivityPub instead of a site that people actually, use. Mm-hmm. Yep. You can go in. I've done. DigitalOcean has a button that you can click to start one up. I'm not old enough to know how Napster works, so maybe. Yeah, that's not part of the ActivityPub spec. Like I said, that's an additional thing that they put on top, but. All right. So, no more questions, and that's it. Yep.